Obeid Khan, founder of Khan Audio, has been building high-quality recording audio devices since 1991. He's the man behind St. Louis Music's Ampeg Revival and Vintage Club series, Reason amplifiers, and the highly successful Magnetone Revival. Throughout the years of his career as a guitar amplifier designer, Obeid has always had an appreciation for the recording medium and its tools. His love for music and the finest audio reproduction was apparent with the launch of Khan Audio. In Obeid's words, "I always try to connect with the player sonically with my designs." His early experiences, repairing his own amplifiers when he was in his teenage years, then playing guitar with metal bands and also a stint with Sinister Dane, make for a very interesting story. Stay tuned for that story and my talk with Obeid Khan. You're listening to Frets with DJ Fey. No lessons, no technique info. I just talk to people who play guitar. Stay tuned. Obeid, really appreciate you taking the time to talk today.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
I've been saying it's Obeid, right?
Obeid.
Obeid. Yeah, okay.
I mean, if you technically want to pronounce it the way that it is pronounced, it's Obeid.
Obeid, like with on the emphasis on the second?
It's a long eh, and the first syllable is more you pronounce it. Obeid.
Obeid?
Obeid.
Obeid? I'll try to.
But nobody calls me Obeid. Everyone calls me Obeid.
Right. Well,
it's the Americanization of it.
Try to. I think it'll be fine.
Just some fun history. Obeid comes from Obadiah.
Oh, biblical.
Biblical. So the full name is Obedullah, Dulla, which is of God, right?
Right.
Obadiah is of Messiah, of God. Obed comes from obedience.
Oh, well, makes perfect sense.
Right? It's probably Greek or something, some shit like that. Or Persian
background.
Or something. Obed, obedience. So obedience to God is what the name means. Obadiah, Obedullah. Do you mind if I pick up the Jazz Master?
Not at all, and I'm telling you right now, it's not in tune.
That's okay. I'll tune her up. It's all about phrasing, right? You can play a million notes, you could do this and that, but it's really about a melody or something that you're...
I always say in the intro to these shows that the podcast isn't instructional. It's not a podcast that goes into guitar lessons or technique. It mostly focuses on a guest's background. But the subject of equipment does come up a lot, which I love to talk about. It's always very interesting to me to hear what gear, guitars, amps, and pedals someone uses.
Mm-hmm.
You not only are a great guitar player, but you've designed amplifiers and developed equipment that reproduces such great audio, and you've made quite a name for yourself among many musicians.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I want to get into the amp design, but first, how long have you been in the St. Louis area?
Oh, St. Louis area. We probably moved here in, I guess I started 8th grade. It would have been 79. I don't know. 76 is when we came to the States.
In the 70s.
Yeah, and I was in 6th grade there. So then 76. It was probably 78 we came here, started 8th grade. You know, I'd seen the neighbor kids in Fort Wayne that had Kiss records alive, you know, and the picture.
Kiss alive.
Yeah, of course, you know. Of course, Gene Simmons and the makeup. And so then we listened to that stuff, and it was sort of my first exposure to rock and roll, American style rock and roll in that way. So, like, yeah, I didn't really see a lot of it firsthand prior to 76. So I sort of absorbed and learned about American music and culture at the same time. And so that was St. Louis, was probably 78. And I was in 8th grade and just learning how to play, from the other kids up the street.
Yeah.
And then, Pink Floyd records and Styx, Grand Illusion, Ted Nugent, Double Live Gonzo, and, records like that. And through that era, listened to a lot of music and played a lot of guitar, the formative years of Hendrix and Johnny Winter and Eric Clapton, Blues Breakers record. I was friends with a group of young kids that were like hardcore blues. We're hardcore blues, And then I was friends with kids that were like, oh, we're hardcore heavy metal. And so I got a little bit of both of those worlds, Albert King, B.B. King, Freddie King, all the Kings.
Yeah, all the Kings.
All the heavy blues licks, vibrato. So, I just kind of grew up and played.
Yeah, it was great to get that exposure when you're that age. And then
I was sponging it in.
Yeah.
Every bit of American culture and music. I had a Gibson SG first guitar, junior, one pickup, and a Fender Champ, Vibra Champ, Blackface. Those are the real instruments. Before that, it was like a junky global guitar, and I think I put a 1/4-inch jack on the line input of one of those little cassette recorders. You remember those?
Oh, yeah.
The single
right.
space-looking weird little cheapies, and then that was my amp. I put it in record. I pushed the button and press record with no tape in it, and then it would play through the speaker.
Playing through that, wow.
So that was before the Champ and the SG Junior.
Yeah, I had a couple pretty cheap guitars. One was a hand-me-down from a cousin before I started buying some decent guitars. But my understanding is that your love for engineering or designing amps came out of when your first amplifiers needed repairs. Instead of taking them somewhere, like to a shop, you would do the repairs yourself. Am I getting that sort of right? Or?
Sort of. 14-year-olds can't really fix stuff. Unless they really understand it. And I understood enough to get zapped off the Champ a couple times. But luckily my dad was like, he was an electrical engineer, mechanical engineer. His specialty was heating and cooling, like air conditioning systems. And he put them he used to put them in buses in Karachi. They'd have these big buses, like, the bus you see with people all hanging out the windows and painted on the side, all that crazy stuff. They would get them empty, and he put air conditioning systems in them, his company. It was Ali Autos, I remember. There's all stories from my family, Anyway, he would help me, with the Marshall or the Fender. That they were generally reliable, but I remember the first Marshall I got, I had no idea. I bought it out of Trading Times for $200.
A Trading Time.
Yeah. And, Mom gave me a ride out to like House Springs or something to pick it up. And it was smaller, the head cabinet, than a regular Marshall. And I was like, man, I don't know what the deal with this amp is, but it's smaller than a 412 cabinet in a 100-watt. After, I'd gotten another setup later. I still couldn't understand why this one was smaller. I used it for a long time. I had this little Marshall head, 50-watt. Well, turns out it was a Plexi. It was a small box, 50-watt Plexi. I had no idea at the time, and just, it's just another amp. It was my first Marshall, really. So my dad, he charted that schematic out for me because he was like, okay, Obeid's playing guitar. See, I said it.
I bet.
He said, okay, Obeid's playing guitar. I better kind of see what's going on with this thing. And he drew it out. And I have that piece of paper. It was on a graph paper,
cool.
Big piece. And it says Obeid's guitar amp. And it's a schematic of a 50-watt Marshall.
Did you frame it?
Man, it's a tattered piece of paper. It's folded up in my basement. If I was a little more organized in my brain where I can keep some semblance of sanity, then I'd have it framed somewhere. But since I'm a type that's of the other side of the brain, my whole house is a complete mess.
It's great that you still have it, though.
I do still have it, yeah. So nice. Dad was always helpful in those ways, and that's where I kind of started to learn how to keep them running, work on them. Yeah. It didn't come until college that I felt like I could sort of tear into something and mess with it, modify, build, tweak a circuit. That stuff came later.
Gotcha. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Looking to buy a guitar, an amp, pedals? Find great deals on all of these as well as audio and recording gear at reverb.com. You can also sell your gear through Reverb. They have great articles about music gear and bands. And Reverb believes music makes the world a better place. That's why they created Reverb Gives, that provides youth music education programs all over the world with the instruments they need to make music. Link to Reverb through Frets with DJ Fey in the show notes for this episode. In the late 80s, a band that had a big following was Sinister Dane. I know there were several incarnations of that band, but you were in the lineup early on?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say early. They had a few guitar players. It's like the guitar player was the rotating spot in that band. Kirby Kelly was a previous guitar player before me, and he was great guitar player. He still plays around Austin, Texas area, but it wasn't really his style. I'd played in, through high school and college, heavy metal bands. I kind of crossed over into the Eddie Van Halen, Yngwie Malmsteen, all that sort of technical stuff that was happening at the 80s. So Sinister Dane, they sort of they were really high energy, like punkish ska, reggae, and I think the element of that crazy rock guitar. And I didn't just, I played rhythm on, chink, chink, clean stuff.
Yeah.
And heavy kind of rhythm. It just worked. So that was fun.
I was going to say their sound was kind of Funkadelic meets Bad Brains or something.
It was definitely a different sound, a different way of writing songs. It was a little, I don't know how to say, like angular, not scattered, but just a different way of approaching a song and a melody and how to put things together. And I think it did catch the ear of a lot of people in St. Louis and outside of St. Louis too. And that's when I was at West End Music also that's where a lot of the formative amp stuff happened as well. I remember going to Swing City Music with Casey Sutton. He was the owner of West End Music. I met these guys through Silver Strings, right? I worked for Ed, Counter, and that's where I met everybody, really. Everybody in town would go there. Dee Dee. I met Skip Gaze, instrument repair. Just everyone, all the musicians in town would it was just the place to go, a hangout music shop. So that's where I sort of met everyone. I don't know. I'm sort of going off course here.
No, you're leading right into, I was going to say.
To bring it back to Sinister Dane. Then, right, that's where the beginnings of that was I met all the young kids that were playing in the scene. And then Casey went to open his store, West End Music. I went over there and opened up my little kind of electronics shop where I would do some mods. And we bought that amp from Swing City Music. We went over there. I bought this Trainer YBA1 for $25. It was in their junk pile. I took it back to the shop. It had a lid. You just took 4 screws off and the whole lid came off. The amp was right there. And so that became my first chassis test bed that I could, bend on and tweak on and try a circuit and get a sound out of it. Yeah. And I had messed with Ed had given me some chassis from Silver Strings, like old Fender Super Reverbs, and I kind of messed with them a bit towards the latter part of college. Built an amp, wooden box, Con scraped in the front, Sinister Dane, used it with them. It, came out of that West End Music, the back of West End Music, that development off of that Trainer. Then it became an actual Con amp head. My dad helped me form up some chassis up at the Innertherm shop there.
Oh, wow. I used to work for Innertherm when I was very young.
Really? You might have known my dad.
Production artist. That was my first full-time job. Innertherm Heating and Cooling.
That's it, on Morganford.
Yeah.
What years were you there?
I was there right after I graduated from, not college, high school. I got an apprenticeship, they called it, kind of basically an internship, working 20 hours a week as a production artist, doing like their owner manuals and installation instructions, which I loved back when we had drawing boards and more like drafting.
On a drafting board, and you'd lay it all out.
So that's where I got my start. And then by the end of my first summer, my boss said, would you like to work here full time? And so I'm like, okay. Kind of kick-started a little. I actually worked at the Spring and Park location, but there was a Morgan Ford office also.
Oh,
they had a couple different offices. But
in the 70s then?
Yeah, it would have been, yeah.
So
was he there? Did it cross over at the same time?
You're older than I thought.
Yeah.
I think my dad started there in 78 when we came to St. Louis.
I was there 4 years, so yeah, wow.
He was over here, you were over there. It was a little different. They had to.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, interesting.
Yeah. So at any rate, that's where Amp Development 101 began. Oh, and at Silver Strings, here's another story for you. Ed would have me run amps down to Poncho. Do you know Poncho?
No.
Wayne Lichtenberg, Poncho. He's still around. He's there at the sound company that by Eddie's Guitars on Manchester.
Oh, I've seen the shop.
You've seen the shop there. Mm-hmm. So Poncho, he just sound at Blueberry Hill and stuff, Duck Room. He's still around, Poncho. Great guy. So I would run amps down to Poncho. He worked at Tower Grove Music from Ed's place. And then I would see what Poncho was doing. I didn't know, still, at that point, I didn't really know. But I got to know Poncho a little bit and see what he was doing there. And then I'd go back to college. And then Ed gave me those 2 chassis, and I started kind of tearing the transformers, make something that works out of it. And I had a Mesa Boogie. That's another story. I had a Mesa Boogie that I bought new at the end of high school. So I had the schematic of it. I'd sold the amp subsequently. That's another story. We'll get to that in a minute.
That's all right. All right.
We'll come back to the Mesa Boogie story.
Okay.
I had the schematic, so I said, let me just try and build this amp, see what it does, if I can make it work. And so I did. That was the last part of college before the trainer and the con head at West End Music. But then that con head, I used it with Sinister Dane. A year and a half, 2 years I was in that band. Yeah, I used that head. I still have it. It works. Built it out of transformers from a McGowan PA or something. You couldn't get stuff back then. You either had to strip it out of old gear, or you had to really know somebody that had contact to Stancor, Triad, all those transformer companies. And it's really kind of hard to do back then.
Or you would just Frankenstein it from
or
parts.
Frankenstein it out of parts from something you found at Gateway Electronics, That's sad. Gateway's gone.
The one on the Rock Road? Or wait, what am I thinking of?
That's Electronics Exchange.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of.
Bruce, yeah. See, I know all of these nutty characters from St. Louis. They're all fun people. Doug and Lisa from Gateway. Stuart, her dad, that I used to see over there buying parts from in those little yellow shopping bins that they had. Fun stuff. So yeah, Sinister Dane. We ran the gamut, went on tour, Living Color. That was fun. I'm glad that I did it, and had that experience and lived it. At the end of that band, or my tenure with that band, I sort of had a choice to make whether I would go down music path or engineering path. And I sort of, at that point, I took the job with St. Louis Music. It was like, okay, what are you going to do? And I'd been out of college for a couple of years. You know how it is. Your parents are like, okay, we're going to send you to college. You better do something. This is your backup plan.
Yeah.
Oh, this music crap, if that doesn't work, they weren't even like, they were like, no, that's, we're going to let you do this for a bit, but eventually, how parents
You will work.
You will work and have a job. And, so I took that path, St. Louis Music. And, it was like another chapter, growing and learning.
Yeah.
I guess they said, hey, this kid looks like he's got some talent. Let's put him to use and make him do something over here.
Nice. Michael Goldberg's book, Wicked Game, The True Story of Guitarist James Calvin Wilsey, goes deep into the life of a brilliant but doomed unsung genius who we lost too soon. Jimmy wasn't just a great and unique guitarist, but a music pioneer. Michael met Jimmy Wilsey in 1982 at a Silvertone gig, and a few years later interviewed him in 1987. Not long after that, they became friends. His book tells the story of a charming, incredibly talented guy who ultimately succumbed to the dark side of addiction. It's riveting, funny at times, heartbreaking, and tragic, but fascinating, and hard to put down.
I mean, Jimmy basically was responsible for the sound of Chris Isaak. It was his guitar, and that really set the whole mood for those songs. That's two notes, the beginning of Wicked Game. That song, 30 plus years after it was a hit, is being listened to millions of times on Spotify every month.
My Talk with Michael Goldberg is available on Frets. I'm sure a lot of the audience is familiar with St. Louis Music, but that company's beginnings go like way back to the 1920s, I think.
Way back.
Yeah, they have a very long and interesting history of being a supplier of musical instruments and equipment. And I was wondering how your entree into that was.
I got hired because Gene, the owner, had come down to West End Music. We were a crate and Ampeg dealer. Casey got the dealership, and I think a couple people came down, Tony Badamo, Tracy Dean, the sales guy. They might have gone back and told Gene, hey, go down to this new shop that we opened up. There's a kid down there working, he played guitar. I don't know, maybe Gene just came in. He was like that. He would drop in on his small customers. He was a big owner of a big company, but he was always on the ground level with the people. So he came by one day, says, oh, Obeid, what are you? I said, yeah, this Ampeg SS70, yeah, this is great. Yeah, these are cool. I said, they're not as cool as the amps I got in back, tube amps. And he was like, oh, really? And I said, yeah. I showed him. I said, look, this is, and he must have went back and told the engineering guys, hey, bring this kid in here and see if you can hire him, do something with us. So they did, and I went in and talked to them. They offered me a job. I mean, I was like, yeah, sure. It's $25,000 a year. I still remember.
Wow.
I was like, wow, hey, this.
Which back then was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money. It was pretty
yeah.
good. And so I started working there. It came from Gene. So that history, just real quick, Gene was Bernard Kornblum's son. Bernard and his brother started it in the 20s.
The 20s, right?
Mm-hmm. They had a store. It sold like sheet music and violin accessories and things like that on West Pine. Gene was Bernard's son. He took it over, I'm not sure, sometime in the 50s, maybe 60s. And he grew it and did this partnership with John Karpowitz and had that amplifier, the crate amp, first developed the box and all that stuff. And so then they had a factory, and yeah, that's where I worked. A lot of people worked there from St. Louis. Mm-hmm. It was a good family place. It felt that way. Gene would always come by. You'd see him at least once a week in the production building, in the R&D building. So he was very hands-on. And I learned a lot from that time at that company. All the people, all the other engineers.
Sure.
The marketing group, the service calls that you get, just all the aspects of a business. And he was a great guy to work for, Gene. And then I subsequently worked for his son, Ted.
Ted Kornblum. I don't know Ted, but I've known of him for years. So I really wish I would have hung on to it, but in the 80s, I think it was, I had one of the wooden crate amps. It was a CR1, like a 20 watt. And I do still have a crate acoustic amp that my daughter is currently borrowing. But yeah, it's just another small crate. You mentioned that you had worked during your time at St. Louis Music. That was one of the things. They kind of resurrected from, wasn't Crate kind of, did they acquire Crate or how did that happen?
No, Crate was a brand that they created.
They created it.
From that wooden box that you.
The wooden box, yeah.
That you had, yeah. And they worked that thing as a entry-level brand line. Quite a few years. It had some hold in the marketplace. It was the very low end. People completely thought that they were just complete junk. which, they weren't entirely junk. They were good designs for the time, economy, solid state amplifier. Certainly after the original concept of a crate, which was maybe part of the reason why it caught on because of the unique look.
Kind of novel
thing. You have to have something different to grab people's attention.
That's what, and I was young and I thought that's cool. And I didn't hang on to it very long. I wish I still had it just because it'd be kind of cool to have in the corner.
It's nostalgic, sure. But like, you had to really make a splash. I mean, even more so now. It's so crazy now that you can't be heard unless you're on the internet, which I really don't like that at all. That's a whole other discussion. I'm sort of marketing negative in my own self. I'm a little bit of a hermit and a recluse, and it's turning out that's like really not a good thing in this internet world. And you have to put yourself out there in order for people to really hear what you're doing or know what you're doing, They did acquire a brand, Ampeg. That's the brand that they acquired. They had Crate, they developed it up to a certain point, then they acquired Ampeg. Once they acquired Ampeg, sort of raised the bar, because then it was like, okay, what are we going to do? The first thing that they did was 500 SVTs. One of 500, they did the run, and they had all parts from the original vendors. They built them exactly like the old ones. I mean, those amps are out there now. People, they're worth money. First 500 that SLM made, they made them just like the old ones.
Wow.
So that was the beginnings of St. Louis music sort of stepping up their game. Perception then was a little bit higher of the overall company. Crate was still kind of a crap solid state low-end brand, but they started bringing in, they started doing tube stuff, SVTs. Then they hired Lee Jackson. Lee Jackson, the hot rodder Metaltronics guy from LA, 80s. See, these are all like, I'm from a different world and time, it seems like, Yeah, just for Lee Jackson, I'm going to play that.
Okay.
He built stuff out in LA, California for all those guys, Vivian Campbell and all those, metalheads in the 80s.
Yeah.
So then I don't know how they hooked up with him, maybe Ken Hensley or something, who was artist relations at the time, and they hooked up with Lee, and Lee had gotten to some point with Metaltronics that he needed to get out. And they hired him, and so Lee Jackson was working there. And he was working on the Ampeg guitar stuff. He did his light-up logo and all that. And so I got hired, and, Lee was like, hey, who's this kid come over here and talking about tube amps and Marshalls and stuff? And I was like, oh, come on, Lee, So we became friends, At the time, it maybe not so much. We were a little bit. But later, of course, we became friends. I'd see him at guitar shows. But it was in that time that then we did the first Crate tube amp that I did for him. And I was like, yeah, here, this is what you need. I'm not playing through any of that stuff. I'm going to play through this. And then they said, okay, Karpowitz said, okay, you make it then.
And it was no longer the wooden box. It was
the amp that you would play through. You make it. He charged me with it. I said, okay, I'm going to make it. And then that was that original Vintage Club.
The Vintage,
93 or whatever it came out. Blonde, 112, 30 watts. It had a great clean channel. The dirty channel was Crate dirt, buzzsaw crap. I just put a bunch of gain in there just to keep them happy. The time was the 80s. Everybody wanted gain.
Yeah.
They wanted a channel switching, but the clean side on that amp was like, it was butter. Complete Fender heaven, buttery low end, squishy. They loved it. When the guys plugged in on the floor and they were like, oh my God, this thing sounds great. It's $600. So they sold a lot of those amps.
I bet. And you designed the Ampeg Diamond Blue?
Then after that Crate, it was, Ampeg stuff, Diamond Blue, guitar amps, Jet, Reverb Rocket. I did a B15 reissue, 100-watt thing with flip top, the whole thing. That was the B15R, came in the 90s. I worked with Jess Oliver, the original designer. He was an interesting character. Yeah, it was a good time. All the while learning about electronics from various other engineers that had stronger specialties in other areas. Like I knew basically nothing about op amps and transistors and things like that. So I learned so much from the other engineers there, Gerald Tears. He was the guy. You'd go in Gerald's office. Oh, hey, Gerald, what do you think about? And he'd answer your question with a question. He was that kind of guy. He'd make you think and figure it out. But it was good because there was a whole community there and we could all sort of brain trust and develop stuff. We had a DSP guy. He came up with the first multi-effect board. It was this big. And, but it was our first DSP board. And so there was a lot of stuff going on in that engineering department you didn't really see from outside. But, graphics guys, industrial designers, board layout, engineers, all the way from, Lee Jackson and myself, all the way to like Gerald, that was like really into that transistor stuff and full theory understanding.
So ultimately, you were glad your parents said you need a...
Oh, it was a good time for sure. I didn't mind not playing in a band for a while. I said, okay, I'll take a break, I mean, I still played gigs.
Sure.
Played just little pickup blues stuff here and there. But I sort of quit playing for a while. Not really quit, but not in the musician scene.
You weren't playing out.
Yeah. And even now, I'm not really in the musician scene, even though I feel like I love music more than I love electronics. Because electronics is my job now. Yeah. And music is fun. If music was my job, which it was at one point, I hated it. I was like, I don't want to get up. I'd look at the clock and go, it's ticking down. I got to get up and go take a shower and get ready and go do this.
More from Obeid Khan after this. If you're a podcast addict like me, you might have thought about starting your own. I'm having a lot of fun creating and sharing my podcast, Frets with DJ Fey. It seemed daunting at first, and I had no idea how to proceed after recording my first episodes. Then I discovered Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout has helped over 100,000 people, even knuckleheads like me, launch a podcast. The tools they provide make it incredibly easy to get your thing going. They'll also help you get your podcast into all the major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and more. You get a great-looking website, audio players to drop into other websites, analytics, and tools to promote your podcast. To get a no-risk free trial of Buzzsprout, or to find out about their low-cost monthly plan options, follow the link in today's show notes and let them know that DJ Fey sent you. Learn the ins and outs of podcasting through people who eat, drink, and breathe it. Buzzsprout, the easiest way to start a podcast. Now, back to mine.
This is Obeid Khan, and you're listening to Frets with DJ Fey.
Well, around 2008 or in 2008, you founded Reason Amplifiers?
That was when St. Louis Music finally got sold. Okay, what are you going to do? I thought, well, I got to still keep doing this somehow. And I found a guy out in St. Charles, Anthony. He had a cabinet shop. And so we partnered together and did this amp company. And we were green for sure to the industry. I thought that I knew because I had been in St. Louis Music. I'd seen all the departments. I'd seen what was needed. Not that I had any of those other things covered, but I knew that you had to have them in place. We were still a little green, and just didn't really have the funding. It was the boutique time. And I mean, we had good designs came out of it, but the company never had any real financial success. You know, it just kind of was what it was, and it was a neat thing. And like I said, cool designs came out of it, but it never ended up really going anywhere. Which is unfortunate, but sometimes that's just how it goes.
And then there was the revival of Magnetone.
Then Ted came a-knocking. I got snookered by some fellow engineers. I'm going to tell this story. All these SLM guys, he said, "Oh, Obeid, listen, you know, Ted wants someone to do this project, and you're the guy. We're going to help you because we'll be the buffer between you and Ted, so you won't have to deal with him directly." Like, this is like Ted's some sort of crazy mad guy. He's not. He's really a great guy. Yeah, I mean, I love Ted. I've known him for years. But working with Ted in that capacity, I knew it was not going to be good. They said, "Okay, we'll shield you from this. We'll be in the middle." Okay, that's fine. And that way I agreed to do it. But one of the more with it guys on that group, Greg Geerling, he could see that that's where I needed to go next. He didn't know exactly where it would end up, but he knew Ted enough and the family enough that he knew that, okay, this was possibly just a boondoggle down a path with Ted, but there was potential for it to actually happen and come to fruition. So Geerling was the one who sort of orchestrated this thing where there was a group and I was, okay, then I could come in and then they would buffer. But then one by one, they all started falling off the buffer. And then it was just left me and Ted, and I'm holding the bag. And I'm like, okay, Ted, what are we going to do here? You got to cover your end of this deal, and I'm going to cover mine. Okay, yeah, we're going to do it. Yeah. And I mean, we ended up doing it, but it was a struggle for sure. You know, a startup. I mean, we all felt some pain. Ted felt it as much as anybody else, even, way more. Because he was writing the checks. But what a great thing to be a part of.
Oh, yeah.
A startup of a sort of a semi-legacy brand that he bought the name, and then we resurrected the thing.
Yeah.
We did the vibrato circuit, and it sounds great. And then people accepted it, and they remembered it from the past. And it's a lot of hard work to get there. And it wasn't just me. Believe me, Ted put his time in on it, and Chris and Diane and everybody over there at the shop, we all dedicated every bit of our time and energy and life to it. I mean, they're still over there. I mean, I still work with them. I just work from the outside now.
Yeah.
It's a little too much because I ended up doing all of the inside accounting and purchasing and sales support and service calls and sometimes doing final assembly and just anything. I just ended up being the last guy with it all. And then I once at one point realized I'm not that guy. I can't do this, I'm not a run a business guy is what I was doing. I was running a business. And it wasn't really me. So then I went to Ted and said, "Hey, I can't do this, This is not me. I only fit the one page that says engineering. I don't fit these other jobs that you need for this business, but it's not me." So I had to take a little hiatus from the thing. And then they still struggled to find a general manager type person that could fit in that. I mean, we knew what we needed, but we just couldn't find that person. Both Ted and I knew we need this kind of person in here. Finally, he found someone, Rodney Washburn, and he's been great. Companies, he just knew what to do. He could see the potential. He had the sales chops and the language. He had the general administrative experience, business, numbers, all that crap, end of year reports, all that stuff. So he came in, company's doing well. I continue to do design work for their new products, and I do it from the outside, and it's been a lot better.
You like it that way?
I like it that way.
It's good.
I mean, it's, it was hard. It was a struggle.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, for the listeners, I'll just read a short list of just some of the guitarists who have used and loved Magnatone amps over the years, going way back. Scotty Moore, Eddie Cochran, Grady Martin, Lonnie Mack, Keith Richards, and Mick Taylor. Even Neil Young is a big fan. The list goes on, and more recently, Jason Isbell and Jeff Tweedy.
It's a
much loved amp.
It's a super legacy brand. It has all people have memory of it, and now I think it's come to the forefront that now the younger people now have some association with it. Then they look into the story, they realize, oh, it goes back so far. So it brings a lot of credibility to that brand. I'm really proud of how everything's turned out. I mean, my little part in it, it's been a success story. You know how you work at stuff and you're like, oh, I'm working on this. And you're like, it didn't really, I missed it by that much. And this one, it's kind of nice to see that, okay, it's kind of panned out into something.
It's great. Well, even though I'm just a guy who likes to play just for my own enjoyment, I'm saving up my money in hopes of getting a Magnatone. I just think they're beautiful to look at. I'm really loving the look of the Croc collection.
Hey, that's all Ted.
I just want to look at them.
I know, that's all Ted. I got to tell you, he was the eye of design on the outside of that amp, for sure. I mean, I may have done the guts of it and the sound, but he did every bit of that cosmetic treatment. So
nice.
Yeah, whatever you see on that that's Ted. And you know what's funny is his dad, one time when I was young over there, and I was like, Gene, yeah, look at this amp. This is it right here. And he goes, but Obeid, it's in a wooden box. I said, who cares? It's nobody cares about what it looks like. Here, listen, Gene, listen. And Gene said, no, Obeid, you're wrong. He said, people buy sound with their eyes. And I was like, get out of here. You're full of crap. And then later I realized, no, he was right. People buy stuff with their eyes. Definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you have to make it look good. You have to make it feel good. I mean, I started to understand all those little nuances about life and things, and the design of this tuner, clip-on tuner, or the design of this iPhone, or, how this little power module has a radius and a feel to it, So then those seemingly small little details, they can be critical things in how it's perceived. Touch, taste, smell, feel, that kind of perception where you can't really quantify it, but if I handed you something, you would go, oh, and you get a feeling right away off of it, So then I still work with Magnatone. I just work from the outside, which is great. And it's allowed me to have some free time to go back and just scheme up some new stuff. So I came up with that little PAK amp.
Oh, yeah.
I just had to do it. It was an idea in my head for so long. And I kept seeing all that Class D stuff out there. And I was like, that's terrible sounding. I mean, it's great that you can have this tiny little thing now. And it's great for bass players because they want clean power. Yeah. But for a guitar player, no. I had to have a vacuum tube in there. So I made the PAK amp, which was like a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks like a little Class D thing, but
you can throw it in your gig bag. It's pretty small.
It's so small, and then it sounds like a real guitar amp. It's like, oh, that's like a little Plexi Marshall, or this new one's like a little blackface Fender.
When getting back to the look of things, didn't you base it on the look of, you have a GTO or something?
I have a 65 GTO, and I made it kind of look like the Dash with the radio with the two knobs. I'm into symmetry as well. I think people are symmetrical. People like symmetrical things. You put your speakers on either side of your monitor, So when I look at a product, if I can, I like to incorporate symmetry into it. I mean, some people say, I don't like symmetry, then they might not like it, but I like it.
Yeah.
I think it falls within a certain group of people than your taste. If your taste, see, I'm a guitar player also. So I hope that the taste I have in that translates to the customer when they get it.
Yeah.
It does, usually.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So then that's kind of how that works. So we made PAK amps, and then I tried to take all of Gene's comments about the look and the feel. I made extruded sides so that they were smooth, and you put your hand on it, you know. I could have just did a metal bent box, but I paid for an extrusion, and they make an aluminum extrusion. They cut it to length, and I use it as my side blocks just to have that feel. So I did the Con Audio products, some stuff that was in my head, and I had to just get it out. PAK amp. And I had been building a DI box, a tube DI, that was basically the Ampeg SVT DI. And when 07, when St. Louis Music was sold, and that I started making that on my own. That really was the beginning of Con Audio. And I continued to sell that DI, tube DI box, I mean, till today. Really, it's one of the staples of my little business. It's a nice little, I updated it a little bit this year and changed the look a little bit so it didn't look so much like an Ampeg. It kind of had a little Ampeg look to it, just to sort of people to understand what it is. But now it's got a little bit of its own identity. I made it a little bit smaller so it travels a little easier. And I mean, it's bass players from all over are using it. I don't even know. It's been in a whole bunch of churches and praise and worship guys. It's been on like Latin Grammys guys that are playing like Cuban Afro music and stuff. I mean, I've shipped to like Japan, New Zealand, Europe. I mean, all over the world. So it's been a good product for me.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
People kept noticing this swampy feel in my playing, and I thought, well, geez, I've come all this way to find a unique style. Maybe I should just accept where I came from and investigate why I play the way I do.
I know I hurt you such a long way back. Some people keep pushing on back.
Singer, songwriter, guitarist, actor, session man. My talk with Walter Parks is available in Season 2 of Frets.
When you shouldered it, when you shouldered it, when you shouldered it, yeah, you shouldered it.
I saw that Richard Fortus of Pale Divine, Love Spit Love, and currently Guns N' Roses, he uses the compact, or he's played through it.
He has one. He bought one. Rich is a good friend from back in the day, and I was happy to know that he was moving back to St. Louis a few years ago when he moved back, and then happy to also find out that he lives 5 minutes from me.
Oh, yeah.
So just off of Olive. So now I think he was happy too, because then he was like, oh, hey, Obeid, I have a couple of things. Can I bring them over? And then so that was great because Rich was bringing over stuff like all these obscure British amps, El Picos and High Watts and Watkins and Carlsbros and Kellys, all this weird stuff. And I just enjoyed working on it, because I'd never seen any of this stuff, or some of it I had never seen before. And others I'd only heard about. And here Rich turns it up. He was like, oh, look, I got a Watkins Joker. You know, the one with the tape delay built in it? I'm like, oh, my God, look, it's got a tape delay built into the amplifier. What the heck, you know? So I got to work on all of that stuff and like learn about all those sort of weirdo things.
That's great.
So yeah, it's been good being friends with Rich and him back in town. And, he did a great thing for himself, when after the Eyes and all that, and he split town and went to New York and said, hey, I got to do this, See, he took that I was talking about the paths.
Yeah.
He took that path and it turned out successful. And here he is,
He's done well.
And then now we live down there. We're right around the corner. And it's, 56, 57 years old, still doing it in some way,
It's wild that you guys found out you live right by each other.
No, it's great. I love it. It's awesome. I helped him with his studio, trying to put in a patch bay and amp switcher and a bunch of amps up there and then cables into the other room. And it's kind of pro now, kind of pro. So that was a fun project. I work on studio stuff too. I have a friend who just moved here, and he said, Obeid, do you know what a Neve 8068 is? And I was like, yeah, I know what it is. And he said, well, I have one, and I'm moving here, and maybe you can help me with it. I said, yeah, I'll try. I could try. And so I don't know if you know what a Neve 8068 is. It's a mixing board that's been used in every giant studio from New York to LA. Appetite for Destruction was cut on one.
Huh?
John Lennon's Double Fantasy was cut on. One was at Record Plant, one was at Sunset Sound or wherever in the West Coast. Somehow David came up with this board over the years, and then he said, "I'm moving to St. Louis, so now I get to work on a Neve 8068 console, 1977." Class A electronics, full, it takes up the whole room. Modules pull out, cards inside. He's got the book. It's this thick.
Wow.
You open it up and you open the sheets out to full-size sheets. They're this big, and it's the whole schematic, block diagram. I mean, for me, it's candy. It's total candy for me. But actually, he's a great guy, David Huff. He was he's in the Christian music market. He's been there for a long time. He's one of the OGs that sort of broke that genre of music or scene. And he was in Muscle Shoals at first. Then he was in Georgia. And now he's moved here.
Wow.
His daughter lives here or something. So, and I got to know him through Reason Amps.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So then he came back around and said, Obeid, will you help me with some studio stuff? Sure. So we installed the board. It was a whole team. We worked on it for like 2 months, and we got the board installed. Other guys doing construction, and finished it off. I cleaned everything, every switch, every rotary. I got it all working. He did sessions. He said, Obeid, it's been the best this board has ever ran. I think he was using it in states of disrepair and just kept on using it like that with workarounds and stuff, because he didn't have a tech in Georgia, anybody that could work on it. I know I'm going too long on this one, but I like this one because it's such a cool desk, man, and I love working on electronic stuff. And guitar amps is like, it's where I started, but I still just love all of it, So when I got to work on that desk, it was great. And then I got to spin the EQ and listen to it while he was playing some stuff through it. And it just sounded so good.
Wow.
So it's nice to have the experience and say, yeah, I know that console. 31102 input, the module and what it does. And it's just a whole language and a culture and music, and the technology of it. It's just all in me.
Well, aside from that, any projects and or products in the works these days? Are you always into something?
I'm always into something. I'm doing some stuff with Magnatone this year. I'm working on something at the lab. It's a different kind of a tube compressor for studio stuff. I like to do stuff that's different. Like with that PAK amp, I could have made a box, put my name on the front. I wanted something different. I didn't want to just do the same sort of thing over and over. So, yeah, this thing for Magnatone that I'm going to do, I'm going to try and make it a little different. I always try to make things a little bit, because, you have to grab their attention with it. Otherwise, it just gets lost in the sea of noise, There's so much noise out there now. That's something about my brain is I can't take too much of it. I guess I'm one of those people that likes just silence and keep away and work on my thing that I work on.
Get away from the overload. Obeid Khan, once again, I want to thank you for stopping by on this sunny St. Louis day. It was great finally getting to meet you and talk with you.
Yeah, thank you. I hope your listeners get some enjoyment out of some of these stories.
I'm sure they will. It was great. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Frets with DJ Fey. If you like the show, you can follow or subscribe for free at most podcast platforms. Hope you'll join me again next time. Stay tuned.
Can we talk about tuning?
Sure.
Real quick?
Yeah. Is that insanely out of tune?
So when you hear the very first notes that you ever heard Eddie Van Halen, it's Running with the Devil, right? The first song on their first album.
Yeah.
And when those chords come in, his guitar is perfectly, absolutely in tune. What he figured out was that the major third is sharp by 12 cents because of the division into 12 notes. When the canonists or whoever they were over there in Europe broke it down, they had to make an approximation on the fret for guitar. So the major third is always sharp. If you tune the guitar, and you play this chord, that third is very strong. When you play it under distortion through a Marshall, it's like this. So Eddie, in his brilliance, said, we got to flatten that third. If I'm going to do anything where I play this chord, I have to flatten that third.
Huh.
So now he tuned it to this. He just let the amp roast, full distortion. And if you just tune to that, it's flat. When you play this chord,
Right.
Look how horribly out of tune that is. But he did it so that this chord
compensates for it.
See, that's perfect. If you were to tune it to the tuner, that would be out. It would crash through a Marshall. So Eddie's tuning was very, very critical. And in some songs, you'll hear it, like Dance the Night Away. It'll go. You'll hear that B flat.
Yeah.
So in the middle section of Dance the Night Away, those chords, there's a story. Eddie, he played it for his friend. His friend, yeah, that's great, but what's the deal with the what's the deal with that? And Eddie just was like, I don't know. The producer liked it. He said, keep it. So we kept it, But he knew more than that. He was like, he knew, no, I tuned it for this chord because this is the, you want that Beach Boys. You want Beach Boys down here. And that's tuning that third.
Wow, that's great.
And getting it right. Huh. So if you've ever gone in the studio and had to like track acoustic guitar down here and then go, why can't I get these chords in tune, right? You'll never get them in tune, ever.
I always wondered why.
The guitar is an imperfect instrument, and you have to adjust it for the chord voicing that you want to play.
That's why between songs, people are.
He would tune the thing. If it was dance, he would drop that B and drop the E a little bit, and then check this chord. Okay, it's good. Check the 2 open. Okay, that's good. So then, if you're doing like this, let's see. So those are together, but this is sharp and these are flat. But if you don't play them together, you never really know. So he just worked his way around the instrument. People were like, "What? I don't know why I like it, but I like it because it was very pleasing thirds, Beach Boys, barbershop quartet. They don't have frets. This doesn't have any frets. So when you sing the Three Stooges, hello, 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 you hit that third, it's perfect because the human body, the human brain will resonate before. I mean, you're not going to go 12 cents up and beat against that other guy's note. You're going to put it right there where it resonates. So Eddie
Van Halen,
master of tuning.
Wow, that's great. I love it.
Also master of keeping a Stratocaster tremolo in tune without any lockdowns.
Huh?
That's a whole other trick. If you want to addendum your broadcast, there's more. You have to tune down to the note, hit the whammy bar, let the strings go sharp, tune down to the note. Don't go under the note. If you go under the note and come back up, you've moved the slack to the other side. It's a trade-off. You get it like this, then if you go up and you try and do some crazy bend, the string's flat. And then you know what you have to do? You have to hit the bar. Comes back sharp again. Now it's in tune. All those tricks, you go and you see Van Halen in the early days, and it's like, how's he doing it? He's got a stock Strat tremolo, no lockdowns. He's wanging the crap out of the thing, and it's in tune. Same, you go see Yngwie Malmsteen, that crazy Swedish guy, I mean, love him or hate him, he figured out how to keep that guitar in tune. There's ways to do it. It's not easy, and it's not as cut and dry as everybody. See, everybody wants the easy answer.
Yeah.
Oh, just give me the lockdown. Oh, just give me the pill. I just want the pill. It's no easy answer. You have to suffer it, and if you do suffer it, you become more in tune with what it really is, what it's going to do when you do this or that to it. So I vote for the path of suffering through it. Makes it a little bit better, a little more meaningful to you. I love that guitar.